Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Kayla Rogers, and I am an Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Women's Fund. For those of you who are not familiar with the Women's Fund, we are a not-for-profit organization located in Houston, Texas, and our mission is to provide women and girls with the tools that they need to be advocates for their health. So we do this through focused seminars like today's presentation, as well as curriculum-based classes and publications. Our services are free, and that includes our publications. If you're interested in downloading free PDF versions, you can visit our website, thewomensfund.org. I've linked it here below. And there you can also submit a publication request form for physical copies. So I will be sending this link in a follow-up email after today's presentation. So today we are kicking off our New Year, New You awareness series. And we are very fortunate to have Octavio Martinez here with us to talk about forgiveness. A little bit about Octavio. He is an experienced trainer, sales manager, corporate relationship developer, and speaker with more than 30 years of experience. He shares his knowledge of leadership, personal development, and relational skills with people throughout the United States and around the world. He has addressed audiences and conducted seminars for businesses, colleges, faith-based communities, and non-governmental organizations in Norway, Ecuador, India, Italy, Germany, and I'm going to pronounce this so wrong, Tajikistan.
Tajikistan.
Yes,
Yes,
thank
Tajikistan.
you so much.
You're welcome.
We're so fortunate to have you here. We're really looking forward to this presentation. And so I'm going to
Thank
go
you.
ahead and turn the floor over to you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, let me go ahead and hang on a second before I screen share. Let me just say this. Hey, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm really more interested in making this a conversation that's beneficial to all of you. So I'll make a few opening remarks. I'll use some slides for a presentation. But I'm actually more interested in hearing back from you, especially if you don't agree with me. That'll make the conversation more interesting for everybody. Feel free to say you do agree, but if you're not certain or it doesn't make sense or you don't buy into what I'm sharing, then let's talk about it, unwrap it, and we'll go from there. But here's how I'll ask you to share those questions. Please utilize the chat option, which should be on the bottom of your screen. You'll see the phrase chat and a little icon. You can address the questions specifically to me, or you can just put it out to everybody. If you have a burning question that you just have to share in the next 10 to 15 minutes, let me ask you to really hold on, perhaps jot it down and then share it. And then here at the end of this little presentation, Kayla and I will look through the questions. And I'll pick the easy ones and we'll go from there. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start the screen share and let's go here. So this is the talk, and this one's going to be called Let's Forgive. It's under the idea of why we don't do it. And I'm going to start off by saying, I'm making a statement. First of all, everything I'm going to say, especially if you don't agree with it, just as if you were shopping, try it on. If you're not certain it's going to fit, if you're not certain it's for you, I understand. But just try it on and consider that some of the principles or ideas that I'm sharing might actually be helpful and might actually work. And I'll also make this opening remark that the more pushback or the more disagreement that you feel, the intensity of it, might be an indication that it's most needed. And so the first thing I'm going to open up with is this, that everything is relational, everything. Now that comes from the way we handle politics to where you purchase your food. In fact, I'm willing to bet that there are some places where you shop that have nothing to do with being close by or convenient. They have nothing to do with being the best price. You just like the people who are there. Everything's relational in terms of how we get along with our neighbors, the churches that we are part of, the friendships that we have, everything's relational. And because of that, here's the other reality. Everything that's relational is also going to break down. So when people talk about having a relational skill set and making friends and connections and doing all that, that's important. But what's equally important and maybe even more vital is, what do you do when things go wrong? How do you handle breaks in relationship, or how do you handle broken relationships? If you don't have that skill, I can assure you, your careers, your work experience, relationships, marriages, everything is going to have an expiration date, 9 months, year and a half, 3 years. And this is why you may have noticed that there are people that seem to bounce from business to business, church to church, relationships and relationships, moving. It's not always that they're on an upward career path. It could very well be that you just have lousy, relational skills. Could be. Okay, so let's go to the next here. I'm going to briefly make this statement. I'm not going to open it up. There are booklets on my website, which I'll share at the end, where you can download all of this for free. Here's what I'm going to say about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not distance. It's not a matter of pulling away from somebody emotionally or physically. That could be practical and helpful, but that's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is also not trust. Just because someone is forgiven doesn't mean that makes them a morally better person. So if somebody has betrayed you, stolen from the organization, betrayed your confidence in sharing things that they were not supposed to share, you can forgive them, which is for your benefit, because, and here's one of the first points I wish to emphasize, especially if you're taking notes. Forgiveness is primarily for the forgiver. It's not about the other person. Now, the other person may benefit from your forgiveness, but forgiveness is for you, period. Hard stop. Second thing about forgiveness, the last thing is that forgiveness is not fair. It's not a matter of justice. It's not a matter of equaling out the scales. If you think in your mind, or if you have said consciously or unconsciously, well, when he does this, then I'll forgive him. That's business. You set a price for your idea of forgiveness. If they do this, then I'll do that. That's business. That's a transaction. That's also not forgiveness. So forgiveness is not distance, forgiveness is not trust, and forgiveness is not fair. Now, I think most of us who live in the West, if you grew up in the West, you love the idea of forgiveness. We all love the idea of forgiveness until you have to forgive somebody, and then, all bets are off. But as difficult as it is, it's difficult because it's actually healthy. And I'm going to make a lot of analogies to our mental, emotional, and spiritual health, to our physical health. So for example, like me, you probably have made commitments to, keep your weight down, or go to the gym, or do other healthy habits, cut down on the pan dulce or whatever. And, that lasts for a short time, and then you fall back into old habits because it's hard and you have to keep recommitting yourself to being healthy. It's the same way with forgiveness. Forgiveness is a healthy aspect. It's a healthy thing. But often we don't do it because it's hard. And the fact that it's hard tells you something about that it is actually correct and healthy. Because if it was easy, everybody would do it. But we know that being a healthy person, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, is not easy. Simple. You practice your faith, or you practice a particular virtue, or you get rid of toxic situations out of your life. So simple, not easy. So I'm going to speak about the 3 rights that we have and that keep us from forgiving. And here's the first one. It's the right to get even. If you plan on benefiting from the therapeutic value, the spiritual, emotional value of forgiveness, you have to give up the right to get even. And getting even is not necessarily something you actually do. You physically harm somebody, or in that respect, like revenge. But we play this out in our minds. We play over the offense or the words that were exchanged over and over. But of course, when we play it out in our minds, we win. We had the right comeback. We had the snappy response. We had or did the thing that embarrassed our offender. Couples get even by withholding intimacy, withholding emotional support. People get even at work by pulling back from the team or not giving their best on a project or allowing their boss or whoever to fail or to be humiliated. And so if you practice this right, or if you hang on to this right, you will not be able to forgive. Here's the other right that we hang on to. The idea that we're superior. And I think because I'm in this circle, I can speak to it. People in religious communities, people in faith communities do this much more often, but everybody does it. And that is, I am better than that person that offended me. I'm better than the person who betrayed me. And you'll hear it in their language, something like, I can't believe that they did this. But you'll also hear it when people say it to the person that harmed them, especially if the other one is asking for forgiveness or trying to fix the relationship. Well, I would forgive you, but I can't believe you did this to me. Now, I'll make a statement that, again, you might have to consider just trying on for a while before you, if you don't accept it right off the bat, and that is this, that we're all horrible human beings. Under the right circumstances, we are horrible human beings. Most of you on this phone call are choosing to be better. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, but you probably had times in your life that you wish no one will know about. There were probably times in our lives that we were cruel, we were petty, we were dark, we were mean, we were the bullies because we had power. And I think part of forgiveness is recognizing that all of us are in this together. As humanity, as human beings, we have to live and work with each other. And so if you're going to carry this attitude of moral superiority, you won't be able to forgive people who offend you. Now, the final right, as I'm coming to a close here in this particular part of our talk, this is the one that's the most controversial. So I'm going to tell you now to give me a moment to hear me out before you decide that to reject it or accept it. If you're going to be a person who benefits from the therapeutic value of forgiveness, then you're going to have to give up the right to remain a victim. Every behavior, even unhealthy ones, has a payoff to the person who's doing the behavior. It's a strange thing. Two thoughts come to my mind. I recall having a conversation with a person regarding this particular thing, and she really pushed back. And she said something to the effect as if somehow this settled the whole conversation. Well, you just think you're right. And I thought, well, you've said nothing by saying that. Of course I think I'm right. You think you're right. The terrorists think they're right. The Jews in Palestine think they're right. The Palestinians think they're right. You said nothing by saying, I think I'm right. Of course I do. Otherwise, why would I be saying what I'm saying or doing what I'm doing? But how's that apply to this thing about victimhood? It applies this way, is that, as I said a moment ago, every behavior has a benefit to the person who's doing it. If you read the book, or if you're going to read it, you'll discover that I spent 3 years as a volunteer law enforcement individual, specifically a chaplain. And boy, that really opened my eyes to a lot of human behavior, especially behavior that was broken. I knew people who were addicts. I knew people who had problems with addictive behavior. And when you tell somebody, well, just stop doing that, that's insufficient, because even the addict who knows not to do a certain behavior, there's a payoff to them. I'll give you one that's very personal. I started smoking when I was 8 years old. So it's been 20 years now. It's been a number of years. And I don't smoke often, but Lord knows I love it. I love a cigarette and coffee. And I somehow have convinced myself that makes me a better writer. And even though I know it's unhealthy, even though I love the whole experience of it, buying the pack. I love the way a brass Zippo lighter feels in my hand. I love the way the cigarette explodes into this crackling thing when you first light it, and the seductive dance the smoke makes as it twirls up. I mean, I love smoking. But that behavior has a huge negative payoff. And so I keep it as far away from me as possible. The victim, what payoff could they possibly have? Here's what I'll say. A person that hangs on to a victim identity, whether real or perceived, valid or not, can imagine a sense that I'm not responsible for my behavior. Now, if you read the book that's been referenced here, I could have easily remained that person. But because I don't want to be that victim, I can reclaim my life and choose who I'm going to become to a large extent. But a victim can always hang back to something that happened to them. And therefore, I'm absolved of the responsibility to become healthy. Because you see, in the end, all of us are responsible for our own mental, emotional, and spiritual health. Some of you started with great advantages. Good for you. And I mean that your parents, your family, or your circumstances gave you a great foundation. Some of us started further back. It happens. But all of us can move forward. All of us can recapture and regain what was lost. But if you hang on to being a victim, not only will you not be able to forgive, but it's harder for you to move forward to become a healthy human being. Finally, as I mentioned, this is my website, octaviocesarmartinez.com. Those, the three, there's 4 free booklets, but the 3 that I've referenced is how to forgive, how to apologize, and why we don't forgive, which is what I briefly gave you here. Those 3 booklets are available at my website. You can download them. They're free and worth every penny. And feel free to share them with anybody you believe needs them. And then finally, thanks for having me. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let this go back to Ms. Kayla, and let's see what we can take your Q&A.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I took a couple little notes myself.
Okay.
I have some questions, but I want to go ahead and open up the floor. Since this is a smaller group, you can put questions in the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. You can send questions privately if you want to do that, or you can unmute yourself to ask questions. I know sometimes you may have a lengthier question and it's a little difficult to get everything into the chat. So any way that you feel comfortable asking your questions or making your comments. I know, Octavio, you said you're not afraid of pushback. So if you want a little pushback to spark a conversation, we can do that as well. Well,
I'm not afraid of it because we're on a Zoom call. That's the only reason why.
Not in person. Yeah.
Not in person, right.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions, but I will go ahead and kick things off.
Okay.
I guess my first question is, what does forgiveness look like? I think maybe we all have some kind of idea of what forgiveness looks like for us, but in general, what would you say forgiveness looks like? And is that something that is different for each individual?
Sure, that's an excellent question, because in saying you should do this, well, what does it look like? How do I know that I'm actually experiencing it? One aspect of forgiveness is that I can recall the event without experiencing the pain of it. And I'll just use my book, for example. I mean, I can easily remember being beaten by my dad. That's not hard. But I'm not agitated or I'll use another phrase. I'm not triggered by it any longer at all. Forgiveness also is not one and done. There are times that people have mentioned, I know that I've had an authentic experience of forgiving this person several months ago, a year ago, but I'm experiencing some agitation, some negative emotion about this and that kind of thing. And I pointed out that forgiveness is often like an onion. You peel off one layer And that's interesting. You peel off the next layer, it starts to make you cry, you have a response to it. Well, it just shows you that the offense had a deeper wounding than on a surface level. So forgiveness, I think, first of all, will a good indication that that you have forgiven is that you're able to recall the event without any kind of emotion to it. That you're able to wish the offender well. And then I think also that I gave this example in the book. You probably have noticed people that it seems from out of nowhere, normal transaction in life, and they explode or have a very negative reaction. Now, it doesn't have to be very outgoing and verbal and loud. It could be, it triggers a negative reaction that causes them to withdraw, or they pull back, or whatever it might be. Usually, on occasion, there's some kind of a wound there, a mental and emotional wound, a relational wound that hasn't been healed. And the normal events of dealing with people bumped up against that bruised, bump up against that wounded area, and it caused the pain again. But I will say this, and hopefully I think I've answered your question. If not, let's unwrap it further. That there's this mythology that time heals all wounds. And that's, if I do anything else on this phone call, I want to disabuse you of that notion. It doesn't. Time does not heal all wounds. You may not think about it as often, but it's still there. And forgiveness is not a matter of, well, I haven't thought about it for a while.
Thank you. I actually was going to ask you that, what you thought about that statement, that time heals all wounds, in the sense that maybe some people may feel like enough time has passed, I should be over this, right? But you were saying that's not necessarily the case. Just because you went through the process and you felt like you forgave someone, time could still go by and you still, something just comes up and you experience those negative emotions.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you said that, because I was kind of curious as to where your stance on that statement was.
Yeah, let me add another statement, another example that's a bit more graphic. And I'm going to stop saying this after this time. It's in the book, but it's in the book. I think I mentioned that, I might have said it before, that there's different layers to forgiveness because there's different layers to wounding. Somebody accidentally steps on your foot in a crowded bus. They say, I'm sorry, you're annoyed, but okay, it happens, accidents. Somebody betrays you sexually. Somebody betrays you in a business deal, or deeply harms one of your family members. That's a completely different story, even if they say, I'm sorry. And even if you say, I forgive you. And in that sense, sometimes offenses or wounds are like a stabbing. One stab it's going to break your skin, could tear a muscle, cut a vein, chip a bone, puncture an organ, all from one incident. And if there's multiple incidents, then not only are there multiple individual wounds, but they also have layers. So forgiveness is also not one and done. It could require some work. And it's not surfacey. Like, well, if I just say these magic words, I forgive you, then it's done. No, it might involve some difficult, at times painful, but choose which pain you're going to live with, the pain of the wound or the pain of healing and forgiving.
Great advice. Does anyone have a question yet? If not, I have another one. Okay. So it looks like no, not yet. So I guess my next question is about forgiving ourselves for things.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about forgiving other people, but is the process for forgiving ourselves, does it look kind of the same?
So let me lay my cards out on the table here. I'm a Bible guy. I've spent my whole life in church. And so I'll say this as a person who goes to church. I can't understand the language of forgiving yourself. That makes no sense to me. Because if you've experienced forgiveness from, and here's my story, right? If I believe in a moral lawgiver, yes, I might have hurt somebody, I might have been a crappy, shitty person to somebody else, but if the moral lawgiver has forgiven me, am I on some sort of moral footing with that lawgiver that I need to forgive myself? And this is where my philosophy training from university kicks in. Like that doesn't make sense. That's irrational. It's almost, and I respectfully, I almost think it makes about as much sense as so much that I got to go find myself. Well, you can't find yourself because yourself is the you that's looking for yourself. I mean, there's a certain logic to that statement that doesn't compute. So here's what I will say. The language I can get to is, can I accept the fact that I have failed as a human being? Can I accept the fact that I don't live up to my own moral code? Can I accept the fact that sometimes I have been a horrible human being? Can I accept the fact that I am limited, broken, damaged? Yes, that is the first thing, or rather, that is the way that I would describe it. But if someone uses the language of forgiving themselves, they're claiming to be a lawgiver over their lives and the offender and the breaker of the laws at the same time. It could be mentally confusing. Maybe to try it on is to consider, I'm human. And as much as I wish to be a better human being, I fall short of my ideals on a regular basis. But that's why I talked about that moral superiority thing. So do the rest of us. And so when someone does something stupid and shitty, I think, okay, well, I was that guy 20, 30 years ago. That brother needs some help, and maybe I can be their friend. Well, an interesting conversation I had not very long ago was with this sex worker who we've been friends for a number of years. And they said, I want you to meet my friends. That's going to be an interesting meeting. I thought, yeah, sure. Yeah, you bet. And I told them about you already. I said, you're this Catholic guy. And they were all rolling their eyes. But I said, oh, you're the least judgmental Catholic that they know. I go, cool, great. And the reason is, it's not because I'm a great guy. It's because I recognize I have had great failures. And so who am I to be pointing the finger at somebody else? Like, oh, you don't do this thing well, or you fell short. So all that to say, forgiving yourself or forgiving myself doesn't compute for me, but accepting the fact that I'm not at my best all the time does. And therefore, I'm going to pick on Andrea. Therefore, hey, if Andrea does something horribly inappropriate, like, okay, so have I. Hell, I got a jail record to prove it. She's my friend. We're going to be friends. And if I could be a help to her, of course I will be. I no longer have the need to accentuate somebody's worst moments to feel better about myself.
Thank you. I like the way that you thought about that, kind of changing up the way that you word it, and instead of working to forgive yourself, just acknowledging the fact that you are human, and that you're not always perfect, because we talk a lot about that during some of our presentations with positive thinking, and also what is it, like self-compassion, body image, the importance of how you speak to yourself, and wording and language definitely play a big role. But our next question is, it says, can you ask him how pride and ego prevents forgiveness and how to address it so that you can take steps to forgive?
Well, if I hear this question correctly, it's either you're asking for somebody else or maybe yourself. Okay. So how does pride and ego play? Well, it's huge. Pride is not just the conceited, look at me, I'm an amazing person. Pride is also consumed with primarily yourself. narcissistically. Pride manifests itself at times when, if there's a break in a relationship, you automatically assume something was wrong with you. If you're in an elevator and people start laughing, you automatically assume it must be about you and your outfit. You just see the world as if everything is revolving around you, good or bad. But how does pride and ego get in the way with forgiveness? I think it gets in the way primarily like this. As I said, the 3 reasons why we don't. I want to get even, or I'm better, or I'm a victim. If you look at those 3 rights that I've outlined, they are under the auspices of pride and ego. On the rare occasion, I have to apologize to my wife because, she's got it pretty easy married to me now. I hate it. I mean, will be 42 years this July. I freaking hate it. I hate it more because of thinking, I should know better. How am I still not seeing this after 63 years? Or, sometimes I approach it as a joke. I said, hey, I just want you to know that when you're big enough to apologize, I'm big enough to accept it, especially if I did something stupid. Then there's a joke and we talk. Because it comes back to, you asked, how do you forgive yourself and deal with that? Well, I think, again, if you accept the fact that you're going to fail, then your pride and ego doesn't get much in the way of giving forgiveness or being able to receive it, which is maybe as hard or more embarrassing than forgiving somebody is receiving forgiveness from someone else. But pride and ego get in the way, and they're expressed in the 3 rights that I shared a moment ago, which is available on the website as a free download of the booklet, the 3 rights, or the 3 reasons why we don't forgive. Let me know if that answers the question. If not, let me unwrap it a little bit further.
Yes, so that was a question from the chat. So if you feel like the question was, if you need a little bit more of an explanation, just let us know. I guess next what I want to talk about is forgiveness, or what I want you to talk about is
okay.
Forgiveness in different types of relationships. Because I've always, or not always, but as I've gotten older, I've learned, that I don't have to keep certain friendships or keep certain relationships. You never have to forget someone, right? But there are definitely some relationships that I think are worth preserving, or that you have to preserve for whatever reason. So can you talk a little bit about forgiveness in within the family, but also on another end, forgiveness within the workplace?
Yeah, which is just almost like family, because you spend as much, if not more, time with them than you do at home. Well, not for the last 9 months, but generally speaking, that's what happens. So let me briefly go through the 3 types of forgiveness, and perhaps this will, I think this will address your question. The first type of forgiveness is what everybody thinks it is, which is forgive and forget. And forgive and forget is only one type. It's not one size fits all. All of you know, I mean, one of my side jobs is I'm a stylist at J. Crew. I love helping people figure out how to wear and dress and all that kind of stuff. I did it prior to J. Crew with women's clothes, primarily weddings and professional makeovers. So this is why I say that all of us know that when something says one size fits all, it doesn't. That's a damn lie. But that's also true about forgiveness. It's not all forgive and forget for every offense that occurs in life, from stepping on your shoe all the way up to murder and everything in between. Forgive and forget is all of these conditions, or only one of them, has to be present for forgive and forget. The person is not emotionally or mature enough to be responsible for their actions. So think of a child. Think of somebody who maybe didn't know. Oh, I didn't know those were the rules. I'm so sorry. Okay, we're cool. Or there's pretty good reason to expect that it's probably not going to happen again. Actually, really those 2 primarily. So think of a new employee. When you were an intern, when you were interning at the Women's Fund, Kayla, you might have made a mistake because you didn't know. So-and-so helped you out. Done. They don't keep hanging it over your head. So that's forgive and forget. Easy. In fact, if you're not able to forgive somebody under those conditions, that they didn't know, they're not morally responsible, they're incapable, somebody who perhaps has a mental deficiency that keeps them from participating at a higher functioning adult level, how do you hold that against them? You know, forgive and forget. Okay. And so the only healthy response in that circumstance is to forgive them and forget about it. The second type of forgiveness is absolutely harder. The second type of forgiveness is that they are morally responsible. They do know better, and they may offer a half-hearted apology or somehow loop you into the apology. Here's what I mean. If you're interning at the Women's Fund and you stole cash and you're approached about it, what you can't say is, oh, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do this. Of course you knew. You can't feign ignorance. Not only are you mature enough to be responsible for your actions, you're morally responsible. And even if you say, I'm sorry, which you might be truly heartfelt, like, oh, this is my worst moment, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. We forgive you and we fire you to discover God's will for your life. Okay. But sometimes this happens in a relationship or with family. Here's the type of apology that I mean. I'm sorry that I snapped at you, but if you weren't being such a bitch, maybe I would not have had to snap, How is that an apology? You just blamed me for your behavior. Sorry, that doesn't work. Or, geez, I'm sorry that this happened, but if you hadn't been such a mood, or if you weren't so grumpy all the time, or blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, I said earlier, and I'll say this again, this is worth writing down, hopefully, or remembering. Forgiveness is not about the other person, because people usually come back to me and say, so I'm supposed to just forgive them and let them off the hook? No, you're forgiving them to take yourself off the hook, which is a hook of bitterness and a hook of resentment and a hook of vile negative emotions in your head and in your mind and in your emotions that are going to keep you, even if you don't think so, it's poisoning you. So forgive and watch is, okay, I'm going to forgive this person, whether I think they deserve it or not, however I'm measuring that. Not for their sake, for my sake. But I'm going to watch to see if their behavior changes. So if it's not an offense where you cut them out completely, it might be, well, let's see if their moral character develops and I can trust them again. Because just because you forgave somebody doesn't mean you restored them to the relationship they had. And as I said, there's three types of forgiveness. None of them automatically make the other person better. Not one. Not one. So you forgive and watch, and maybe in time, forgive and watch becomes forgive and forget. I'll pick on Andrea again for a moment. Andrea had a moment. We all do. That was way inappropriate, but we're cool now, and she's apologized. And it's been a year, it's been 9 months, whatever the time is, and it's never happened again. She's really working on these things. That's awesome. We're good. I'd like to put her in this position of leadership again. I'd like to put her in this position of responsibilities. And keep in mind that the higher the responsibility, the more pressure there is on the person. And that pressure can really expose somebody. Okay, the last apology. This is the one that's the hardest, and this is the one that I address primarily in my book. Forgive and live. The offender is morally responsible, and old enough and all that. They offer no apology. They blame you. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you being crazy? This is all made up in your head. Why are you saying lies? They refuse to have communication with you. They refuse to talk about this. I could say something to like, hey, Andrea, there's this thing. I'll tell you, we're not going to talk about this anymore. It's done, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They refuse to even acknowledge it, or they blame you completely for the break or the event, or they're dead. Now what do you do? How do you forgive them? The same way. I forgive you and I release you. and I want the best for you. And by the way, as I said, it's not one and done. It might require further repetitive, intentional action, verbally, mentally. Maybe it requires a return to some religious traditions. Maybe it requires chatting things out with a professional therapeutically. But as I said before, pick your pain. Either you live with the pain of not forgiving somebody, or you live with the pain temporarily that leads to health of forgiving the worst offenses. So this is where I see that working.
I think Andrea was going to ask a question next.
Yeah, since you've been picking on me this whole time. No,
how are you? Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. That last, the one that you said was the hardest to forgive, the person that, you know, says it's your fault, that doesn't want to speak to you. Personally speaking, I grew up, and it probably is just my family, or maybe this resonates with other people, but I'm sorry was not in our vocabulary. Like if I did something wrong as a child, I couldn't just, hey mom, I'm sorry. Hey dad, I'm sorry. Those words just didn't mean anything to them. They said, just don't do it. So now as an adult, I have a really hard time processing forgiveness, and I have to do more things that a normal person would have to do to forgive. So I wonder what words you have for people that, you know, forgiveness is a constant struggle. It's not something that is part of their personality. It's not part of something that they can just, you know, be something that, oh yeah, I forgive you, I don't forgive you. How do you help people, like, I mean, obviously with everything that you've been saying, but a little bit more like elementary basics with forgiveness?
Yeah. Do you have anybody in your circle of friends that always seems to be in shape and they eat garbage? Like they eat like a 12-year-old, but they never gain weight? Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I don't like that person.
Right. This is where ideas of murder seem morally comprehensible. So I think all the way almost through my 50s, I ate as a 10-year-old. Burgers, donuts, soda. And then for lunch, I would have, I was just a child. And diabetes runs on both sides of my family. I was smoking on and off. I never really drank. People give me booze for gifts for some reason, but I don't really drink. My point in all this is that there's some people that seem that they can eat crappy and it doesn't seem to affect them. Others, they think about a donut and they blow up. It's funny how you can eat one pan dulce that weighs 6 ounces and gain 2 pounds after you eat it for some reason. Okay, so we all know those people physically. But the same is true with virtues, or the same is true with with mental health and emotional health. For some people, it might be easier. And for other people, it's just damn harder. My default would be violence in most cases. There have been times my wife's something happens on the road, or something is exchanged in the store, or whatever. Something is said to me or happens. I'll say, "Okay, man, we're good." And we walk out. My wife said, "Wow, you didn't choke them out, or you didn't go after them." No, I guess I didn't. I'm surprised. Yeah, you're right. I don't have that automatic reflex anymore. But Andrea, I can tell you that took some work. I had tasted blood in my mouth more than once from biting my tongue. So after saying all that, let me say this. Health, getting healthy. The first few times you go to a gym or change your diet, it's horrible. And then maybe you get to a place, the plateau, the goal that you wanted, the goal weight, the goal strength level. But if you fall back to your old habits, you'll go back to your old self. So there's work getting to a healthy place, and then there's maybe a little bit lighter work or maintenance to stay at a healthy place. So if you were raised in an environment where it was difficult to practice or experience forgiveness, I feel you. I really do. That just means you have a heavier burden to pick up. But it's heavier actually if you just leave it and don't try. So you might maybe it might feel silly. Like I just today, I gave somebody this little, I guess you can call it a mantra. I call it a prayer that I kept in my wallet for 3 years. Whenever I thought about this person, I would, I'm gonna break out this thing again, blah, 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 blah. And there were sometimes I just didn't mean it, but I kept at it until I could mean it. Not long ago, somebody was saying, how often did you go to mass before COVID? I said, oh shit, I went Sunday through Fridays. That's so funny because you're still this guy that cusses and smokes sometimes. I said, well, I didn't say I was a good Catholic. I just say that I go because I've been off the leash before and that shit didn't work. So I put myself purposely on the leash and I limit my behavior and even things that I expose myself to because I need to be triggered to do well, not to be dark. So I would say to you, find the thing that works. Maybe it's returning to a religious practice. Maybe it's talking to a therapist. Maybe it's working through a few forgiveness books. There's a couple that I'm happy to email you the titles of. I'm not trying to make a joke about my book, that are actually, I thought, were pretty helpful. And you find the practice that works for you and you do it. Just like people have to find out the workout schedule or the diet that works for them. I don't get keto. I don't get paleo. I get maybe half a burger. I get maybe drinking half the beer, but I don't get not drinking beer. I stay healthy.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome, madam.
All right. So again, I'm going to open up the floor or not the floor, but if you have any questions that you've been holding on to, definitely feel free to start asking those questions. We have about 10 minutes left. I see someone unmuted themselves.
I was listening. I'm Elizabeth Arellano. I was listening to the conversation. He said so many important, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I just want to say thank you for this presentation because it pinpoints a lot of the forgiveness, especially in people's personal lives. And I'm in the 50s up there category where I was brought up as a little girl that, as it being siblings rivalry and fighting and all this, I was brought up as, I'm sorry. Hey, tell your little sister, your little brother, don't hit him. Say, I'm sorry, don't thank you. And I feel for Miss Andrea, probably the time frame, the age frame, in other words, that maybe didn't know how to say, I'm sorry. But going back to this, I had in my personal life an experience, a couple of them, that it threw me off guard to where it was hard for me to forgive the offender in that aspect. But in my personal life, just a little brief, I had to physically run to get tired until one day I just fell on my knees. And I was at the park one day at one of these tracks, and I ran, nobody was around, and I just fell on my knees. And it was dark, not that dark, but it was getting dark. And I just cried and I asked God to help me forgive the offender because it was something that I personally had to endure this offense. And it was something that I needed to learn to live again. And, and through my personal life, I've had other experiences and I had to go back, and prayer was one of the biggest things that helped me. And as a human being, I still struggle with that. I'm not going to say not, but I had to learn to live. And that was one of the things I do say, Mr. Octavio, thank you so much, because we need to learn to forgive for us. And that was something that I thought that was really an impact. So, I just wanted to share a little something. But thank you so much.
I'll take all the compliments I can get. So thanks a lot. Look, I'll just tag on to that, and that is just to remind people again, forgiveness is primarily about you, the offended, or the person who's forgiving. Forgiveness only requires one person the forgiver. A relationship requires two people, you and the other person.
Mhm.
But forgiving is about you. And that is connected to this idea that I said a moment ago. Is forgiveness hard? Sometimes, yeah. It feels like surgery with no anesthesia. It really does.
Mhm.
It
Yes,
can,
indeed.
especially if the wound is very deep. But
Exactly.
but pick your heart. Which one are you going to live with? Having a difficult marriage is hard. Having a good one, not much of a picnic either at times. I mean, it's super easy for my wife, but for me, this is a burden I've had to carry for years. Getting along with coworkers is if you don't get along with them, it's hard. It sucks because you gotta work with them. But keeping a good relationship with your coworkers, it also is awkward at times. There used to be this joke with my friends when I was working at the church. Whenever Pastor Octavio said, "Hey, so and so, you have time for a cup of coffee?" They always knew something was wrong. I hated getting coffee with those people at those times. But every relationship is going to have its awkward moments, bumps in the road. Period. If you just learn to accept that's the reality of life, then it shouldn't be surprising and shocking when something breaks down. That's why I said it earlier in the presentation. Everything's relational, but every relation breaks down eventually.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story. I feel like that's something that a lot of us can relate to, really just feeling like we're at our wits' end and not really knowing where to turn, and knowing that we need to forgive, but then how do we do that? It's not always black or white, it's not always easy. It definitely, as we heard today, it takes work to forgive. But at the end of the day, we are doing it for ourselves. Um, so, Octavio, I just want to provide you with a couple minutes here. If anyone has any questions, again, feel free to ask those. But I always like to ask at the end of these presentations if there was one message that you wanted everyone here today to take away from your presentation overall, or from this conversation overall, if you could just give a quick little what you would like us to
Sure.
take away.
Yeah. With I'm not saying anything significant here. The last 4 years have been difficult for people on whatever side of the political spectrum you fall on. And we need to heal as a nation, but we need to heal also as a state, as a city, as a community, and with our family and our friends. We need everybody to be at their best, to be the best version of themselves possible. One way that happens, and I'm going to say maybe the primary way, is learning to forgive. Learning to forgive people who offended you directly, maybe as a group. Learning to forgive, because if you don't, you're bringing all the pain from childhood at times, teenage years and adult years, you're bringing that into every relationship and every organization. And forgiveness is a way of flushing out all that garbage and crap. So because we need you to be at your best, learn to forgive.
I think that was a great way to end, especially given today and everything that's going on. I think that's a wonderful message. There's a lot of us I know on this call who can work to forgive some of the people in our lives based off of these last 4 years. So I appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. I have just a few more slides here for us. So if you have any questions while we're still here, you can definitely go ahead and ask those. But if not, if you think of something later on, or if you just have comments, you can always feel free to email us at healtheducator@thewomensfund.org. There's also a survey link on the page. We would really appreciate if you would take a few minutes and fill out the survey, let us know how we're doing, provide us with topics that you would be interested in hearing about. I will be sending the survey link in the follow-up email as well, so you will be getting that. And then these are our social media pages. Feel free to follow us on social media. We post previously recorded presentations, health information, upcoming events. And then on the right-hand side, we have our calendar. So tonight, we have a presentation over cervical cancer that is not listed. It's at 6 p.m. But we also have some other presentations coming up over time management, goal setting and decision making. And then a week from today, next Wednesday, we have a presentation, Staying Healthy in a Digital World, to wrap up our New Year, New You awareness series. So I appreciate all of you taking the time to be here. Octavio, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation. I'm definitely going to be going to your website and downloading those books and getting those books. So thank you so much.
May I offer one last thing to everybody?
Absolutely.
If you were on this phone call and on the email, 30 minutes on me. So if you wish to have a conversation one-on-one, it either could be email or we'll do it direct messaging or perhaps just over the phone, but I'll give you 30 minutes for free, just for sitting through all this and yeah, just as a thank you to all those who participated on this particular conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. That is so generous. I will include that in the follow-up email, and I'll send you the follow-up email as well. That way you see what's included. Alrighty, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.